Hey guys, what's up? I'm Noah, this is Analog Resurgence, and today I'm talking about the dawn of instant photography, Polaroid roll film. When we think about Polaroid, we usually think about, these. This is a Polaroid, the classic white framed image. This is not an Instax. This is a Polaroid. And we usually associate it with, cameras that might look like this, or maybe one of these, or one of these guys, one of these. There's a lot of Polaroid cameras out there, and for a lot of us, Polaroid is deeply associated with this kind of picture. Except that Polaroid didn't just one day start magically producing these 600 cameras and these Spectra cameras and these SX70 cameras. It was a very long time before Edwin Land, the father of Polaroid, got up on stage with the very first SX70, and had it spit out one of those classic looking pictures. So this is called Polaroid integral film. But before integral film, there was another type of film. And I'm not talking about Packfilm yet, but that's what this is all building to ultimately. Before integral film, there was Packfilm. Packfilm came in boxes that, sometimes looked like these, and they took images that looked like this. And a lot of the time they did it in cameras that, looked a lot like these. Before integral film, before Packfilm, there was roll film. This is Polaroid instant roll film. And from the 1940s into the 1960s, shooting Polaroid instant roll film was the only way that you could take an instant picture. Polaroid is the brainchild of Edwin Land, who was, amongst other things, a scientist and an inventor. Edwin Land has big Steve Jobs energy, and in fact, he was one of Steve Jobs' idols. Now, Land didn't start out by working on making instant photos. Initially, his claim to fame was creating polarizing filters. Filters that could control the amount of light that could pass through them, primarily being able to reduce and control glare. Land was selling this creation to a number of people, including American Optical to make sunglasses, and to Eastman Kodak for making photographic filters. In 1937, Land's company started calling itself the Polaroid Corporation, and it was working on various polarizing-related projects into World War II. After that, though, things started to take a different direction. Now, the classic story, and the one that has been told a million times, and the one that has probably inevitably changed over the years, is that in 1943, Land and his family were on vacation, and he and his daughter Jennifer were out taking pictures, and his daughter asked him, "Why can't I just see the picture now?" That question was the beginning of something very, very big for Edwin Land and Polaroid. Also, Edwin Land loved to patent stuff. That was his thing. That was his whole jam. The moment he had an idea, he loved to get it down on paper immediately with his name on it. He got so many patents attached to his name, which is why, for a long time, nobody could touch instant photography and the stuff that Land had created because he had it locked down. That is until Kodak tried, and they got sued. But also it makes sense, because at that time, in 1943, there was no instant photography. Nothing like any of this stuff that we have come to be so used to. For Packfilm, for Polaroids, for Instax, any of that stuff, nothing like it existed. So it made sense that Land wanted to get this down on paper, because as soon as you think of an idea like that, it just becomes so obvious that it's bound to be stolen by somebody else. Land started working on this stuff right away, initially with a smaller team of people, but slowly amping up production and research and development on this stuff. And they had early instant photography test shots of vastly varying quality within months. Some of them were yellow, some of them were blue and white, but slowly they moved towards a more consistent black and white image. Land's idea was for an instant film system that was self-developing and created a positive print for you to see almost immediately after taking the picture in your camera. And by 1946, the people working on this project at Polaroid had some pretty consistent and decent looking results, considering it was 1946, only 3 years after he had been asked the question by his daughter. In New York City in 1947, Edwin Land sat in front of a special 8x10 camera, took a picture of himself, the film was removed, put through a special processing unit that was separate from the camera, and after 50 seconds, Land peeled apart this image of himself and showed off instant film to the world for the very first time. It was straight up a little bit of magic, but in reality, straight up a ton of science. I recently read the book Instant, The Story of Polaroid by Christopher Bonanos, which was super helpful for being able to kind of put this into like layman's terms so that if you're not a chemical engineer, you can kind of understand this process. So I'm pulling this quote from that book, and I would heavily recommend it because it's a really interesting read on the beginning of this stuff all the way up to like the bankruptcy of Polaroid and then the beginning of the Impossible project. As the timer counted down, the inside of that paper sandwich was undergoing some remarkably complicated processes. One side, the negative, dampened with goo, had developed in a few seconds, where its silver halide crystals had been exposed in what were the lightest, whitest areas of the subject. They had turned dark. The remaining silver halide, unexposed, was being chemically induced to send its silver across to the photo paper, where it made the dark areas of the final print. That was one of Land's great breakthroughs. The stuff that normally went down a darkroom drain was instead being used to make the picture itself. A year later, this stuff was ready for market, and Polaroid's instant roll film format launched with the Model 95 camera for a price of $89.75 in November of 1948, along with the very first Polaroid instant film, Polaroid Type 40. This is the Model 95, and this is the very first model of instant film camera that was ever released to the world. And it predates Packfilm cameras by like 20 years, and just by looking at it, it's not really something that a lot of us would associate with being able to take an instant picture. The cameras usually looked like this, with bellows and a front plate that would fold out for the lens. If you see any of these old Polaroid cameras, they're not for pack film, they're not for integral film, but they're actually for roll film. I have to say, like, these are really nice. They have this really professional look and quality to them that we're just not used to seeing with instant cameras. Like, design-wise, it's a long way from one of these to one of these in the 80s. Now, as for the film, there were quite a few different types of instant roll film that were made during this time. Type 40 film was a sepia film that produced 8 prints of 2 7/8 inches by 3 3/4 inches. After a lot of hard work though, they managed to create true black and white film as Type 41, released in 1951. So Type 40 was a 100 ISO sepia film, followed by Type 41, which was 100 ISO, but true black and white. Throughout the 1950s and into the 60s, other films were released. Type 42 was a 200 ISO black and white film. Type 43 was a higher quality version with a better tonal range. Type 44 was a 400 ISO black and white. Type 46 was 800 ISO black and white film that actually produced a transparent slide instead of a print. And Type 47 was a 3000 ISO black and white film. Let's take a second here and acknowledge just how incredible Type 47 film was when it was released. In the 1950s, 3000 ISO was not a widely available thing. High ISO films like that just didn't exist. You were shooting things that had like really low ISOs, like 100 and below for a lot of things, like 40 and 25, and that's just like, it must have just been really bright in the 1950s. But 3000 ISO, when it was released by Polaroid in instant film, was the highest ISO film available in any format, instant or otherwise. But all of this incredible hard work and research and development and the popularity of all this instant stuff that just kind of came out of nowhere in the 1940s and 50s led to the creation of the very first instant color film ever made, Polacolor, in 1963, released for these formats as Type 48. Polaroid was also releasing smaller versions of the same roll film that just gave you smaller prints and worked in slightly smaller cameras. So regular size was Type 40 stuff, the slightly smaller version was Type 30, and there was even Type 20 film for cameras like the Swinger. The Swinger was a plastic version of the roll film cameras that appealed to like a younger audience, like teenagers, and it was popular. It even had a really popular commercial with a jingle that I will not play because I don't want to get copyright claimed. But Polaroid's habit of making like, you know, cheaper, more affordable plastic equivalents to like nicer cameras, like these cheaper ones for pack film and these cheaper ones for integral film, started with the introduction of the Swinger. So this is a very, very expired pack of Polacolor in Type 38, which is for the smaller ones. So this Type 80 camera here will take the Type 30 film. It expired in 1967. It has not been stored well, which means that it is probably absolutely toast, which is why I am sacrificing it in order to show off this format, how it loads, and exactly the breakdown of the roll film format. But let's take a look at this film and these cameras. Now, if you've been watching all my videos, and I hope you've been watching all my videos, because hey, you know, I've been watching all your videos. I've not been watching watching all of your videos. Back in March, I actually did just a little kind of tease for the roll film format, and I was actually out shooting some of this stuff with real results with my friend Alex, and we're gonna do more of that, which means that you need to finish watching this video, stick around, because there's gonna be more. There's gonna be more of that, there's gonna be more Packfilm, there's gonna be all sorts of crazy stuff. All you have to do is just keep watching. Polaroid roll film is what it sounds like. It's instant film that's on a roll. Okay, it's actually two rolls. So one roll is the negative component that captures the image when you expose. This faces the lens when you load it. The other roll is the print component that will be the final positive image that you get once you peel it all apart. In between each shot is a chemical pouch that holds the goo that will develop your images. People call it goo, you can call it developing chemicals, you can call it a caustic jelly, which is what it's printed as on the package, but Polaroid goo it is. When we open up the back of your camera, there's actually two sections that open. You load one roll in one side of the camera and the other roll into the opposite side, and then you close up the first back piece. Now pull the leader around and then out. You can see the rollers here come together when you close the first back piece, and then the negative and paper are sandwiched together and they sit here until they're ready to be peeled apart so that you can have your final image. Once you close the camera, there's this bar here that cuts each shot once it's finished. We load our roll, we pull the paper leader out, and we tear it off. And then it's ready to shoot. All the developing for this stuff happens inside of the camera. So we snap a picture and we have to advance the film through the rollers. We do this by pulling the film out and advancing it, and then we pull until it stops. The image we just took is contained in the back compartment here. It's gone through the rollers, punctured the chemical pod, and spread it out across the negative and the print that are sandwiched together. Now we wait for it to develop. Once it's ready, we open up the back, peel apart the image, and this is our instant picture. The negative portion, unfortunately, is now trash, but we can't remove it just yet. Now, I know on certain later versions of Packfilm, you can actually do stuff like rinse or bleach in order to retain and save the negative that you've taken on your instant peel apart film. But for roll film, you couldn't do that. The negative portion, unfortunately, can't be salvaged like that. So we set our print to the side, and then you can take the next picture. We do the same process again, and this time, when we're pulling the image through the rollers, we're also pulling out the previously shot negative for disposal. We tear that part off, and then we wait for the next one to develop. And so on and so forth, until you've shot all the images on the roll. It really does share a lot in common with Packfilm, which actually came after roll film. For comparison here, Packfilm also works essentially the same way in terms of being a chemical sandwich with a chemical pod that is spread across the image and then peeled apart. Integral film, though, didn't need to be peeled apart, and instead the chemicals would spread across the image underneath the top transparent layer. Other cameras that took this format included the Model 100, the 110, 150, 160, 700, 800, 850, 900, J66, and those were all for Type 40 film. The Type 30 film really only had a couple versions of the Model 80, which was just kind of introduced as like a smaller, lighter one that was easier to kind of carry around and travel with. Also, all early black and white Polaroid instant film needed to be covered with this protective coater. This protective print coater was a squeegee that was dipped in chemicals and is still wet, that was included with all the types of black and white film that you would buy, right into the Packfilm stuff, and even necessary for later professional Polaroid instant stuff as well, into the early 2000s. If you didn't coat your black and white prints, they would fade and degrade and could be damaged very easily and very quickly. So unfortunately, Edwin Land's vision of just like really effortless, easy to use and accessible instant photography came with this kind of awkward, gross, sticky step. You had to smear this stuff across your black and white print every time. And listen, I haven't figured out how to make these videos with smell-o-vision, but if you guys all want, I can send out a scratch and sniff card that is, oh, just this, like, just the classic scent of the Polaroid print coater. It's like vinegar, or like Alex refers to it as like wasabi sauce, but it's very pungent. Color film prints, though, didn't need to be coated, although the color stuff was more prone to curling over time just as like the layers on the film shrank. So as an answer to that, inside of the film packs, they included like cardboard print mounts so that you could stick your print to it and then the picture would flatten out. All this stuff was crazy successful for Polaroid as well. well, and Land thought they would sell 50,000 cameras from 1948 to 1953, but they ended up selling 900,000. It paved the way for further improvement on instant film, as we all know, based on the version we're more familiar with today. Polaroid also did a smart thing and involved artists by supporting them, buying their work, giving them film to use, and this really added some legitimacy to instant photography, which kind of was initially seen as a bit of a gimmick, especially by professionals. So when Polacolor launched in 1963, it did so in both the existing roll film format, but also in a brand new Packfilm format. And this was the dawn of Polaroid's instant Packfilm. Packfilm was essentially the successor to roll film, and it was easier to load, and slowly Packfilm did take over entirely and replace roll film. Most of the roll film types that were being manufactured were discontinued in the 60s, and some making it into the 70s. But Type 42 and Type 47 were actually manufactured in more limited quantities for more specialized camera stores up until the 1990s before they were discontinued entirely. So for most of us, especially someone admittedly as young as myself here, are really familiar with this stuff, which is the integral film, and kind of aware of this stuff, which is the peel-apart film. An entire generation grew up with this stuff, roll film. If you find yourself one of these instant Polaroid roll film cameras today, there is no currently manufactured, modern, alternative, equivalent, replacement, whatever, for instant roll film. All of this stuff, again, was discontinued as early as like the 1950s for some of the stuff, but as late as like 1994. So you can still find expired 47 and 42 stuff on eBay, but it's hard to find this stuff that was really well stored. And it's like impossible to find well-preserved stuff in order to shoot color. And it's not really a format that you can kind of easily start chasing down in order to get into now. Because Polaroid stopped producing all instant film between 2006 and 2008, the availability of any of Polaroid's products are really based solely on the success of projects that have like brought this stuff back. So the Impossible project, which became Polaroid Originals and is now just Polaroid again, brought back integral film for SX70, 600, and originally Spectra. And currently there is in the very early stages still a project that works to bring back Packfilm in some form. But there's nobody that is focused on bringing back roll film, which to me is really interesting because integral film, which is the stuff that was most recently brought back, is, you know, the buildup of all of this hard work to get to that. It's by far probably the most complicated process. And Packfilm is difficult as well based on, you know, the pack itself, how things are loaded into it, the mechanisms of being able to pull each one apart and peel it successfully. And it does seem like roll film is one of the most basic ways to make an instant picture. And yet there's nobody working to bring this back. And I mean, all the cameras are pretty old at this point, and the format lacked the versatility that came with shooting Packfilm, where you could get film backs for really expensive cameras. Roll film was really just kind of primarily meant for these cameras. There was a back that could go on certain 4x5 cameras, but for the most part, it was limited to these cameras. So I don't know, maybe everybody just put everything on hold, go back to the drawing board, and just make roll film for a little bit, and then build from there. Now, if you do find yourself with a camera like this, and you know, you're just kind of initially thinking that you can still shoot Polaroids through it, because, I mean, it says Polaroid on it, you are out of luck for being able to shoot fresh roll film through these things. But I will throw links in the description down below based on conversions that can be done to these cameras. There are modern options for these things that allow you to be able to shoot medium format film, 4x5 sheet film, Instax conversions, or even conversions to be able to use Packfilm with them. Except the availability of Packfilm is also pretty slim, so it's maybe not one that I would go with. But there are options available for these old roll film cameras now. And that brings us to the end of Polaroid roll film and what was the very beginning of it all. It was Edwin Land's brainchild and first major breakthrough when it comes to photography stuff. Each format after it is kind of like building upon the basic version of roll film, making it into Packfilm, and then making an entirely instant version that is integral film. But the real next step is to actually go out and shoot some of this stuff, which is happening this week. If you come back, probably tomorrow, depends when this goes up. Stay tuned, same bat time, same bat channel. My friend Alex is helping me out with all of this stuff, and we'll be going out and shooting some Type 42 and 47 stuff. There will be scans and examples. We'll be shooting it and showing off how it works. And together, he and I have been working through the Polaroid formats of roll film and pack film. So in the coming weeks, as I continue to cover pack film in the different versions of it, there will also be companion videos where we go out and shoot this stuff and shoot some old expired stuff that we have access to, as well as some of the newer Fuji stuff and, you know, some surprises. And also, really importantly, these two roll cameras and the film that Alex and I have access to, and Alex's work in general, is all made possible through his work with the Film and Photography Preservation and Collection Management program at Ryerson University here in Toronto. I will throw links in the description for information on the program, as well as some of the work that they've been doing. And there's also the P.O. Box address down below if you want to send us a weird roll film or pack film. If you have experience shooting roll film, if you grew up with it, or if you have family members that have it, I would love to see samples of stuff. If you have samples that you would be comfortable with Alex and I having access to and using as samples to preserve some of this stuff as well, then let me know down in the comments and we'll get in touch. I'd love to see more color samples of this stuff. There's also the Patreon for Analog Resurgence, wherein all the scans for pack film, for roll film, for everything that's coming up in the next like month or 2 months or however long it takes to put all this together will be available for all of your viewing pleasure on there if you want to support the channel a bit. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys soon.